Hello, ocean adventurers, and welcome back to Saltwater Stories. Today, we're heading back somewhere truly special, a place you might actually remember from a previous visit, this magical group of islands where nature just seems to play by its own rules. Think remote paradise, life you won't find anywhere else on Earth. And picture a creature there, one that completely flips what you think you know. An animal you'd probably associate with, well, freezing cold landscapes, icebergs maybe, but nope. It's right there, thriving pretty much on the equator. So get ready for an amazing story of adaptation or resilience, a real survivor in a totally unexpected place. This amazing animal is the Galapagos penguin. Now, you might recall we were in the Galapagos not too long ago. We talked about those fascinating marine iguanas, remember? Watching them dive for algae and then warming up on the rocks. Incredible stuff. Well, today we're focusing back on these islands, but this time on a bird that honestly seems completely out of place there. It's quite a story of survival against the odds.
It really is. And what's so fascinating, I think, about the Galapagos penguin is how much its whole story, its survival, its struggles, its ups and downs, tells us about how connected our oceans are. We're going to explore, how it actually manages to live in such a warm place, look at the roller coaster history of its population numbers, which has some real drama. And then we'll touch on what scientists are learning now, including some really recent kind of puzzling news that's got people asking questions.
Okay, so let's start with the basics. A penguin on the equator. When you think penguin, you picture snow, ice, Antarctica.
Right. That's the image.
Exactly. That's the standard image.
So this little guy, Spheniscus mendiculus, that's its scientific name.
That's the one, Spheniscus mendiculus.
It completely shatters that image because it's the only penguin species anywhere in the world that actually lives and breeds north of the equator. Just think about that. A bird built for the cold, making a life in the tropics. It really changes how you think about where penguins can live. It does. And the immediate question, of course, is how? How can a cold-adapted animal possibly survive near the equator? The answer isn't about the air temperature so much as what's happening under the water. There are these incredibly powerful cold ocean currents.
Ah, the currents.
Two main ones are absolutely vital. Think of them as giant cold water highways bringing the chill northwards. First, there's the Cromwell current. It's also called the equatorial undercurrent. Imagine this massive underwater river flowing eastwards, deep beneath the warm surface water, right along the equator.
On the river, okay.
And it's carrying incredibly cold water packed with nutrients from the deep ocean. Now, when this underwater river hits the western edge of the Galapagos Islands, specifically Fernandina and Isabella de Siquedo, the shape of the seafloor forces that cold water upward.
It hits the islands and has nowhere to go but up.
Exactly. It's a process called upwelling, and it's basically like a giant ocean elevator. It brings all that cold water and all those vital nutrients, the building blocks of life, from the dark depths up into the sunny surface layers.
Okay, so cold water plus nutrients. That means food.
Precisely. That sudden injection of cold, nutrient-rich water causes this explosion of tiny marine life, phytoplankton, and zooplankton.
Yeah.
And that, in turn, feeds the small fish that are the absolute staple diet for these penguins. Then you also have the Humboldt Current, flowing north from the cold waters off Chile and Peru. That adds even more cool water to the mix. Together, these currents create this unique cold pool right there in the western Galapagos. It's an oasis of cool, productive water in the middle of the warm tropics.
Wow. So they have their own personal air conditioning and a constantly stocked fridge, thanks to the ocean currents.
That's a great way to put it. That sustained cold water and the reliable food source it brings is fundamentally why they can live there.
It's an amazing adaptation. But even with this system in place, they're facing serious challenges, aren't they? You mentioned their status.
Yes, they are. They're officially listed as endangered by the IUCN, the International Union for Conservation of Nature. Their population is really small, generally fewer than 2,000 birds in total.
Only 2,000.
And as we'll get into, that number can swing dramatically. Yeah. Very dramatically. And sometimes puzzlingly. This small size makes them incredibly vulnerable, especially to big shifts in ocean conditions like El Niño events.
El Niño, the ENSO cycle, right. El Niño Southern Oscillation.
That's it. These are major climate patterns that can basically, turn off their air conditioning and shut down that supermarket, sometimes very quickly.
Let's talk about their family tree a bit. Where do they fit in the penguin world?
Right. They belong to a group called the banded penguins. You can recognize them by the distinctive black band across their white chests. There are 4 species in this group: the Spheniscus genus, our Galapagos penguin, the African penguin, the Humboldt penguin, and the Magellanic penguin down in South America.
Okay, 4 banded penguins.
And what's really interesting from an evolutionary perspective is that this whole group, this Phoeniscus penguins and really all modern penguins, are quite recent arrivals, geologically speaking. They diversified into these distinct species less than 4 million years ago.
Wow, that sounds like a long time, but in evolutionary terms.
It's relatively fast. It shows how quickly life can adapt and find new ways to live, especially when you have isolated places like the Galapagos offering unique opportunities. It's like evolution in fast forward.
So among those 4 banded species, who's their closest cousin?
Their closest living relative is the Humboldt penguin, the one found along the coasts of Peru and Chile.
Okay, the Humboldt. So how did they get from Peru and Chile all the way out to the Galapagos? That seems like a huge leap.
It likely was. The leading idea is something called a dispersal vicariance event. Picture a small group of ancestral Humboldt penguins, maybe just a few individuals, getting swept away from the mainland. Perhaps during a storm, or maybe just caught in those strong ocean currents we talked about.
The Humboldt Current and the Cromwell Current.
Exactly. Those currents acted like a natural raft, carrying them northwest towards the Galapagos. An accidental but epic journey.
So they arrived, this small founding group.
Right. And once they got to the Galapagos, they were isolated. Over many, many generations, they adapted specifically to that unique environment, the lava shores, the specific food, the climate. Eventually, they became genetically distinct enough to be considered a new species, Spheniscus mendiculus. It's a fantastic story of colonization and evolution.
Like accidental adventurers founding a whole new lineage.
Pretty much. But starting from such a small group and then experiencing repeated population crashes over their history, that's left a mark on their genetics. They have what we call low genetic diversity.
Low genetic diversity. What does that mean in practical terms?
Think of it like a library. A library with huge genetic diversity has books on every subject imaginable, ready for any situation. A library with low diversity, like the Galapagos penguin population, only has books on a few subjects. So if a totally new challenge comes along, maybe a new disease or a big shift in climate that requires a very specific adaptation, this library might not have the right book or genetic tool to cope.
Less variety in their genetic toolkit to deal with change.
Exactly. It makes the population potentially less resilient to big, novel threats. This is mainly because of the founder effect, starting from just a few individuals and repeated bottlenecks.
Bottlenecks being those big population crashes like during El Niño.
Precisely. Each time the population crashes, more genetic variation can be lost, further reducing that diversity.
It's interesting, though, despite this low diversity, they haven't interbred with other banded penguins in the wild, right? Even though they might be able to.
That's correct. There are no documented cases of hybridization in the wild. Their geographic isolation of the Galapagos keeps them separate. Although, interestingly, there was a case in a zoo where an African penguin and a Humboldt penguin did hybridize, showing that genetically they were still compatible. But in nature, their distinct habitats and behaviors keep them reproductively isolated.
And even within the Galapagos, are all the penguins genetically the same? Or are there differences between colonies?
That's another fascinating layer. Studies have found subtle but consistent genetic differences between the penguins in the main western colonies on Isabella and Fernandina, where the upwelling is strongest, and those in the smaller, more peripheral colonies, like on Santiago or Bartolome Islands.
So even short distances apart, they're slightly different.
It suggests they're adapting to slightly different local conditions, what we call distinct environmental niches. Maybe slight variations in water temperature, food availability, or predator types. Think of it like different neighborhoods in the same city having slightly different characteristics that residents adapt to. Understanding this structure is really important for conservation. You can't just assume a one-size-fits-all approach will work everywhere. And actually, for their closest relatives, the African penguins, scientists found really deep genetic divides, almost like subspecies. We haven't done that super detailed genetic work for Galapagos penguins yet, but it's a critical knowledge gap we need to fill.
Okay, so we know why they can live there, the currents. We know about their family history. But where exactly in the Galapagos do they live? You mentioned the Western Islands.
Overwhelmingly so.
Yeah.
Their distribution is incredibly restricted, one of the smallest ranges of any seabird, really. About 95% of the entire population lives on the western coasts of Fernandina and Isabella Islands.
95%. Why so concentrated?
Because that's precisely where the Cromwell Current hits the islands and forces that strong, consistent upwelling. That's where the cold water and the food are most reliable. They're literally clustered around the buffet.
Makes sense. And have the main spots where they breed always been the same?
Not entirely. There's been a really interesting shift over the decades, partly due to, well, human-introduced problems and conservation successes. Back in the 1970s, a key breeding area was the Marianas Islets, small rocky islands just off the coast of Isabela.
Okay, the Marianas.
But then introduced black rats got onto those islets. And rats are terrible predators of eggs and small chicks. Breeding success there plummeted.
Oh no, rats are such a problem on islands.
They really are. But then came a conservation success story. In the 1980s, a major effort successfully eradicated feral dogs from the southwestern coast of Isabela Island.
Feral dogs were another big predator.
Huge, especially for nesting birds. Once the dogs were gone, that area became much safer. And a place called Caleta Iguana on that southwestern coast really took off. By the year 2000, it had become the largest, most important breeding colony for the species.
Wow, so removing one predator completely changed where they could successfully raise their young.
It shows just how impactful targeted conservation can be. Getting rid of those dogs allowed the penguins to thrive in a new key location. And there's more good news. The rats have now also been successfully eradicated from the Marianas Islets, that original key site that was achieved before 2011.
So Marianas could become important again.
Exactly. There's real hope that this historically vital breeding ground can recover and contribute significantly to the population once more. It really underscores the value of persistent predator control efforts.
That's fantastic news. Now, about their nests, you mentioned they don't dig burrows like some other penguins. The ground is too hard, volcanic rock.
Right. There isn't much soft soil for digging. So they've adapted brilliantly. They use natural cavities in the lava rock. Think deep, shaded crevices, hollow lava tubes, tunnels left by ancient lava flows, and small caves right along the shoreline.
So they tuck themselves away in the rocks. Why is that so important?
Two absolutely critical reasons. Sun and predators. First, the heat. On the equator, the sun beating down on that black lava rock can make surface temperatures soar, easily over 38 degrees Celsius, that's over 100 Fahrenheit. Those shaded crevices provide vital relief from that intense heat.
Natural air conditioning units.
Essentially, yes. And second, predators. Those enclosed spaces offer protection from land predators, both the native ones like hawks and snakes, and the introduced ones like cats and rats, especially for vulnerable eggs and chicks. In fact, the availability of these cool, safe nesting spots is thought to be a major limiting factor for the population. There might be enough food sometimes, but if there aren't enough good nesting sites, the population can't grow beyond a certain point.
So the number of suitable rocky hideaways dictates how many families can set up home.
Pretty much. Finding and securing one of these prime nesting locations is key to their breeding success.
Okay, let's talk about those population numbers. You said it's a roller coaster.
It really is extremely volatile. If we look back to the early 1970s, before some of the really severe El Niño events hit, the population was definitely larger. Estimates from back then vary a bit, but they range from maybe 4,000 individuals up to possibly 6,000, even 15,000 in some very early, perhaps less precise surveys. Let's say around 4,000 is a reasonable baseline for the early 70s.
Okay, so maybe double or more than the current average. What happened?
El Niño happened. Specifically, the 1982-83 El Niño event was catastrophic for them. Remember our analogy. The ocean's refrigerator went completely empty, the upwelling shut down, warm water flooded the area, the fish disappeared.
Widespread starvation.
Exactly. The impact was devastating. The population crashed by an estimated 77%.
77%.
Yes. A census done right after that event, in September 1983, found only 398 penguins left, total, across all the islands.
From maybe 4,000 down to under 400. That's terrifying.
That's a shocking decline. And then history repeated itself, though perhaps slightly less severely, with the 1997-98 El Niño. That event caused another huge crash, over 60% decline from the numbers just before it. They went from about 1,284 birds in 97 down to just 444 in 98.
Another massive hit.
And the really sobering thing is, despite periods where the population bounces back somewhat, it has never fully recovered to those estimated levels from the early 1970s. These events leave a long-lasting scar.
So El Niño is the bad news. Is there corresponding good news?
Yes, thankfully there is. The counterpart to El Niño is La Niña. La Niña conditions generally mean stronger trade winds, cooler ocean temperatures, and crucially, enhanced upwelling.
So the refrigerator is fully stocked again.
Exactly. More cold water, more nutrients, more fish. La Niña periods are when the penguin population tends to recover and grow. We've seen some really encouraging peaks in recent La Niña years. In 2020, the census counted 1,940 penguins. And then in 2021, they hit a modern record high, 2,094 individuals.
Wow, back up near that 2,000 mark. That's fantastic.
It was really positive news. And the 2020 count also showed a healthy population structure. About 86% of the birds counted were adults, which is great for breeding potential.
Okay, so a pattern emerges. El Niño crashes, La Niña recoveries. But then you mentioned something puzzling, the 2023 mystery.
Yes. This is where things get
Right.
confusing and, frankly, quite concerning. The official census results reported for 2023 by Ecuador's Ministry of Environment came back with a count of only 413 penguins.
Wait, 413, down from over 2,000 just 2 years earlier.
Exactly. That's an apparent 80% decline. Almost 1,700 birds seemingly vanished in 2 years.
That sounds like another catastrophic crash. Was there a major El Niño we missed?
That's the mystery. There wasn't a major El Niño event recorded in that specific time frame that would explain such a drastic drop across the entire population. And adding to the concern, the 2023 count found only 1% juveniles. 1%, which suggests almost total reproductive failure recently.
So what's going on? Is it a real crisis or something else?
That's the million-dollar question right now. It's the single most critical, unresolved issue for Galapagos penguin monitoring. There are two main possibilities, and they're very different. One, it could be a real, rapid, and perhaps localized ecological crisis that wasn't widely detected, maybe an intense marine heat wave in their core area, or an undetected disease outbreak. Or two, it could be a major monitoring issue. The way they count penguins is visually from small boats called pangas moving along the coast.
Trying to spot them on the rocks and in the water?
Yes, and it's inherently difficult. Imagine counting feet in a fast, choppy stream while standing on a wobbly boat.
Right.
You're going to miss some. The percentage of the actual total population that gets detected can vary hugely, maybe 57% under perfect conditions, but potentially as low as 13–22% if the sea is rough, visibility is poor, or lots of birds happen to be underwater foraging when the boat goes by.
So the 2023 count might have just had a really low detection rate for some reason.
It's a strong possibility that scientists are seriously considering and trying to investigate. Resolving whether it was a true biological crash or a methodological issue is absolutely urgent.
So that timeline really is dramatic. The 1970s baseline around 4,000, the 82-83 crash down to 398, the 97-98 crash to 444.
And the positive impacts of conservation, removing dogs, removing rats.
Allowing those La Niña recoveries to push numbers back up near 2,000 by 2021.
And then this perplexing 2023 number of 413 leaving us with this huge question mark. It just highlights their constant vulnerability.
Absolutely. Their resilience is clearly tested again and again. Okay, let's switch gears a bit. How do these birds actually cope with the heat day to day? It's amazing they don't just bake on those black lava rocks. What are their tricks for staying cool?
They have a whole suite of really clever strategies, both things they do, behavioral adaptations, and things their bodies have physiological ones. Behaviorally, you'll often see them standing with their flippers held out away from their bodies.
Holding their arms out.
Kind of like that, yeah. The undersides of their flippers have less feathering and lots of blood vessels close to the surface. Holding them out exposes that area to the air, letting heat radiate away. It's like us opening our jacket when we're hot. They also lean forward, hunching over to shade their feet from the direct sun. Their feet are bare and can get sunburned, plus they're another area where they can lose heat, so keeping them shaded is important.
Smart posture adjustments. What else?
If it gets really hot, they'll start panting, just like a dog. And they do something called gular fluttering.
Gular flutter.
Yeah, they rapidly vibrate the moist skin in their throat pouch. This increases airflow and evaporation from their mouth and throat, which has a cooling effect.
Like sweating, but from the inside of their throat.
A good analogy, yes. It does cost them water, though, so it's a trade-off. But probably the most crucial behavior is simply seeking shade. They absolutely rely on those cool lava tubes, crevices, and overhangs during the hottest parts of the day. Those are their essential natural air conditioning units.
Taking shelter is key.
And, of course, the ultimate escape is the ocean itself. They spend a lot of their time foraging in that cool, upwelled water, often returning to land only in the cooler evenings.
So they use behavior intelligently. What about their bodies? Are they built differently to handle heat?
Yes, they have some remarkable physiological adaptations. Like all penguins, they have a countercurrent heat exchange system in their flippers and legs.
Countercurrent. That sounds complicated.
It's basically a clever plumbing system for their blood vessels. In cold water, warm blood flowing out to the limbs warms up the cold blood returning, so they conserve body heat. But on land, when they need to lose heat, they can adjust the blood flow. They can shunt warm blood directly to the surface of their bare feet and flippers, turning them into radiators to dump excess heat.
So the same system works for warming up and cooling down.
Exactly. It's very efficient. Another cool trick during breeding season, they lose some feathers around their eyes and the base of their bill, exposing patches of bare skin. When they get hot, blood flow increases to these patches, and the skin turns pink or even reddish. It's like having extra little radiators on their face.
Wow. Built-in cooling patches.
Yeah.
And their size. Does being small help?
Absolutely. The Galapagos penguin is the second smallest penguin species globally, only about 50 centimeters or 20 inches tall. Being small gives them a higher surface area to volume ratio. Think of it like a small ice cube melting faster than a big block. They have relatively more skin surface compared to their body mass, which helps them dissipate heat more effectively.
Like a small car being easier to cool than a big bus.
That's a perfect analogy. Plus, being small physically helps them fit into those narrow lava crevices they use for nesting and shelter.
And you mentioned something unique about their molt. They molt twice a year.
Yes, that's highly unusual for penguins. Most molt just once a year. Molting, shedding, and regrowing all their feathers is incredibly energy intensive. Birds usually can't breed while molting, because Galapagos penguins are opportunistic breeders, ready to nest whenever food is abundant. Usually during La Niña, molting twice allows them to be flexible. They can quickly get through a molt, get a fresh waterproof coat of feathers, and be ready to take advantage of good breeding conditions whenever they arise, not just during one fixed season. It lets them reset and be ready faster.
Always prepared for an opportunity. That's incredible. Okay, so when those conditions are right and they head out to forage, what's actually on their menu?
Their diet is very specialized and directly tied to that Cromwell current upwelling we keep mentioning. That upwelling is literally their supermarket, serving up exactly what they need.
And they don't travel far to shop, right? You said they stay close to shore.
Extremely close. Telemetry tracking studies show breeding adults usually forage within just 1 kilometer. That's barely over half a mile from the colony. The average maximum distance they go from the nest is only about 5 kilometers, roughly 3 miles. That's a tiny foraging range for a seabird.
And they don't dive very deep either.
Mostly shallow dives, yes.
Yeah.
About 90% of their underwater time is spent at depths less than 6 meters. That's less than 20 feet. The deepest dive ever recorded was just over 52 meters, or about 170 feet, much shallower than you might expect for a penguin their size. And they hunt during the day, diurnal surging, returning to land in the evenings. This whole strategy really highlights how dependent they are on that nearby, surface-accessible food brought up by the local upwelling.
So what exactly is that food they're catching in those shallow waters?
Almost entirely small, cold-water schooling fish. Things like anchovies, sardines, various types of mullets, and a local fish called the Galapagos salima. And the key word there is small. They strongly prefer tiny fish, often larval or juvenile stages, usually less than 30 millimeters long. That's just over an inch.
Tiny fish, not like the bigger sardines other penguins might eat.
Exactly. This distinguishes them from their larger Spheniscus relatives, who tend to eat bigger adult fish. Scientific analysis, using stable isotopes in their tissues, confirms they feed at a lower trophic level, meaning they eat small things near the bottom of the food chain, like tiny fish that eat plankton. And despite what you might read in older general accounts, detailed studies find virtually no invertebrates, like krill or squid, in their diet. They are highly specialized fish eaters.
How do they catch such tiny, quick fish?
They're pursuit divers, actively chasing prey underwater. And interestingly, they often hunt cooperatively.
Working together.
Yes. Small groups will work together to herd schools of these little fish, driving them towards the surface or into shallow areas where they're easier to pick off. This herding actually benefits other seabirds, too. Things like brown pelicans or the flightless cormorants often hang around and grab fish that the penguins push up. It's a neat example of interaction in the ecosystem.
A cooperative hunt that helps the neighbors too, but again, it all hinges on that upwelling working properly.
Absolutely. That Cromwell current upwelling is their supermarket. When El Niño hits, the supermarket effectively closes, and the consequences are severe.
It really paints a picture of a life lived on the edge, totally dependent on these specific ocean conditions. But the threats don't stop there, do they? They face dangers from diseases and human pressures too.
Unfortunately, yes. Disease is a significant concern, especially avian malaria. A major study a while back found that almost all 97.2% of the penguins they sampled had antibodies for malaria.
Nearly all of them have been exposed.
Yes, exposure is widespread. It's like almost everyone has had a cold virus, but not everyone is actively sick. In that same study, Only about 9.2% had active infections at the time of sampling. This suggests their immune systems can usually handle the parasite under normal conditions.
But what if conditions aren't normal, like during El Niño when they're stressed and starving?
That's the huge worry. The hypothesis is that severe stress, like food scarcity, could weaken their immune systems, allowing those dormant malaria infections to flare up and cause serious disease, potentially leading to large-scale mortality. Adding to the complexity, there was that conflicting report from the Ministry of Environment suggesting malaria wasn't present, or at least the detected strain wasn't confirmed as harmful. So there's still some uncertainty and a need for clarity on the real impact of malaria.
What about other parasites or diseases?
They also deal with blood parasites called microfilariae tiny worms. About 14% of penguins sampled had these, with males being more affected than females for some reason. We don't know the full impact on Galapagos penguins, but in other birds, these can have sublethal effects. They don't kill directly, but can reduce overall health, making the bird weaker or less successful at breeding. There's also potential risk from things like avian pox virus and Toxoplasma gondii, a parasite often spread by feral cats.
It's a hidden world of biological threats. What about external parasites like ticks or lice?
Surprisingly few, actually. Compared to other penguins that might host 28 or 30 different types of ectoparasites, only 5 have been found on Galapagos penguins. Maybe the heat or their specific environment isn't as hospitable for those external critters.
A small silver lining, perhaps, yet the internal threats seem more worrying. And then there are the human pressures.
Yes, anthropogenic pressures, human-caused threats, are a major factor. Fisheries interaction, or bycatch, is one. Although industrial fishing is banned in the marine reserve, illegal artisanal fishing using gill nets still happens, especially near towns.
Gill nets. Those invisible walls of netting.
Exactly. And because penguins are pursuit divers, chasing fish underwater, they can easily get tangled in these nets and drown. It's documented, but poorly quantified. We don't have good numbers on how many penguins are actually killed this way because the activity is legal and hidden. But it's definitely happening. Lost or abandoned nets, ghost gear, also pose a threat.
And introduced predators are human legacy too.
Absolutely. Black rats, feral cats, feral dogs, all brought by humans, intentionally or accidentally, have had devastating impacts historically, especially on eggs and chicks. We saw how rats hurt the Morelos colony and how removing dogs helped Caleta iguana. It's an ongoing battle.
And pollution. Is that affecting them?
Increasingly, yes. And there's some alarming new research on plastic ingestion. Scientists estimate that a single Galapagos penguin could be eating between roughly 2,900 and 9,600 microplastic particles every day.
Thousands of pieces of plastic? Daily? How?
Through their food. The tiny fish and zooplankton they eat are consuming microplastics, tiny fragments of broken down plastic waste that are pervasive in the ocean now. It bioaccumulates up the food chain.
Like invisible plastic confetti getting into everything. What does that do to them?
That's the scary part. We don't fully know the long-term health effects yet. Is it blocking their digestion, leaching toxic chemicals, impairing their immune system? It's a major area of concern in active research. Oil spills are another constant threat from shipping traffic. Even a small spill can ruin their feather insulation, leading to hypothermia or hyperthermia, and oil is toxic if ingested when they try to preen it off.
And just general disturbance from boats or tourism?
It's generally very well managed in the Galapagos with strict rules guides, distance limits, no flash, no drones. But any human presence can be a potential stressor if not carefully controlled. Boat traffic, noise, wakes, it all adds up for sensitive wildlife.
It sounds like a minefield of dangers. But people are actively trying to help, right? Let's talk about the positive side, the conservation work.
Yes, absolutely. There are some really dedicated efforts making a tangible difference. One of the most successful has been building artificial nests.
The penguin condos.
Exactly. Since suitable natural crevices are limited, scientists and the Park Service started constructing artificial ones back in 2010. They use local lava rocks to build shaded, tunnel-like structures that mimic the natural sites, offering protection from sun and predators.
And do the penguins actually use them?
They love them. Monitoring shows they readily adopt these artificial nests. In some years, on Muriel Island, for instance, up to 43% of all the breeding activity recorded was happening in these human-built structures.
Wow, nearly half. That's huge.
It directly addresses that key limiting factor of nest site availability and demonstrably boosts their reproductive success. It's a fantastic example of effective, hands-on conservation.
That really is inspiring. And the predator control efforts are ongoing too.
Yes, that's a continuous and vital part of managing the Galapagos National Park. Eradicating invasive species like rats, cats, and dogs, especially from important nesting islands, is a top priority. We've already mentioned the huge successes, like getting dogs off Southwest Isabella, which allowed Caleta iguana to boom, and clearing rats from Morelos, paving the way for its potential recovery. These actions are fundamental.
And how do they keep track of the penguins themselves? Counting them must be hard.
It is challenging, but crucial. There's the annual census, usually in September, doing those visual counts from boats. That gives the overall population trend, despite the detection rate issues we discussed. But alongside that, there are long-term capture mark recapture programs. They carefully catch penguins, give them a tiny microchip, a PIT tag, like the ones for pets, and release them.
Microchipping penguins.
Yep. Over 1,800 have been tagged since 2001. When these birds are recaptured, or even just pass near a special antenna reader at their nest, scientists get individual data. This is how we know about survival rates, movements, and how they discovered penguins can live much longer than previously thought, at least 17.7 years. This individual data is gold for understanding population dynamics.
And there's legal protection, too, within the Marine Reserve.
Yes, the Galápagos Marine Reserve, GMR, created in 1998, is huge and bans industrial fishing. It has zoning, with no-take conservation zones around key penguin areas like Western Isabella and Fernandina to protect their habitat and food. There have been challenges, certainly. Initial zone boundaries weren't always clear, leading to some conflicts, and sometimes where zones were placed might have been influenced by politics as well as pure ecology. Enforcement, especially against illegal small-scale fishing with nets, remains difficult, but the overall legal framework is a vital protective layer.
Okay, so despite all the challenges, especially climate change and El Niño, you mentioned something surprising earlier, a cooling trend in their area. That seems counterintuitive with global warming.
It does, but it's real. High-resolution satellite data analysis looking from 1982 to 2014 found a distinct cooling trend of about metacrew 0.8 degrees Celsius over those 33 years, specifically in the sea surface temperatures along Western Isabella and Fernandina.
Cooling while the rest of the ocean warms? How?
The likely explanation is a long-term strengthening and maybe a slight northward shift of that crucial Cromwell current. This intensification means more powerful upwelling of cold water right in their core habitat. This localized cooling might even be expanding the area of suitable cold water foraging habitat for them.
So this could be helping them buffer against global warming.
It might be acting as a crucial buffer, yes, at least locally and for now. It could make conservation efforts in that specific area even more impactful. But, and this is a big but, we can't get complacent. Larger scale climate change, especially if it leads to more frequent or more intense super El Niño events, could still overwhelm this local cooling effect. Some models predict that just doubling the frequency of strong El Niños could dramatically increase their extinction risk in the long run. So the local cooling is hopeful, but the global climate picture remains the overriding long-term threat.
And the human element is complex too, isn't it? Tourism brings money for conservation, but also disturbance. Fishers might compete for resources, but also hold valuable local knowledge.
Exactly. Tourism fees contribute significantly to park management. Local fishers have a complex relationship, potential conflicts over fishing zones, but also deep knowledge of the marine environment that could be invaluable for collaborative management if trust can be built. And ongoing education and outreach programs are vital to foster local support and understanding for conserving this unique species. It really takes everyone working together.
All right, let's play a quick round of myth versus fact to clear up some common ideas about these amazing penguins. Ready?
Let's do it.
Claim 1. Penguins were brought to the Galapagos by the Humboldt Current. Myth or fact?
Fact with nuance. Their ancestors were carried there by currents like the Humboldt, likely from the South American mainland. But the Galapagos penguin species, as we know it, evolved in the Galapagos after arrival, so arrived via currents. Fact. Evolved there, also fact.
Good clarification. Claim 2. Galapagos penguins mate for life. Myth or fact?
Largely fact. They are socially monogamous and form strong, long-term pair bonds. Many pairs stay together for multiple breeding seasons. Mate switching can happen, especially if a partner dies or breeding fails repeatedly, but strong fidelity is the norm. So, mostly fact.
Okay. Claim 3. They can breed up to 3 times a year. Myth or fact?
Plausible, but likely very rare. They are opportunistic breeders. And old reports suggest that some pairs might have laid eggs 2 or maybe even 3 times during exceptionally long, favorable La Niña periods. Since the cycle takes 100 days, 3 successful clutches in a year would require perfect, uninterrupted conditions. Possible, maybe, typical. Definitely not. So technically plausible, practically mythical.
Claim 4. They have no land predators. Myth or fact?
Big myth. Adult penguins are fairly safe, but eggs and chicks are definitely vulnerable. Native predators include Galapagos hawks and snakes, and more significantly, introduced predators, feral cats, dogs, black rats are major threats that have caused serious declines. So definitely a myth.
Claim 5. They are the only penguin north of the equator. Myth or fact?
Solid fact. Their range, especially on northern Isabella, extends just across the equator, making them the only penguin species naturally found in the northern hemisphere.
And finally, claim 6, a really important one. The Galapagos penguin population is stable. Myth or fact?
Misleading. While official summaries might sometimes use stable if there hasn't been a consistent recent decline, their population is anything but stable. It's highly volatile, experiencing massive crashes, 60–77% during El Niños, followed by partial recoveries. The long-term trend since the 70s is down, so highly volatile or fluctuating is far more accurate than stable.
Definitely misleading. So even with all this research, there are still some really big questions and puzzling contradictions we're grappling with.
Right, especially that huge discrepancy between the 2021 count of over 2,000 and the 2023 report of just 413. That's the elephant in the room, isn't it?
It absolutely is. Is it a devastating unreported crash? Or is it a major issue with how the counts were done in 2023? Resolving that is the single most urgent monitoring priority right now. And the conflicting reports about avian malaria prevalence, widespread exposure versus maybe not present or not harmful, that needs clearing up too.
Definitely. We need consistency between detailed scientific studies and official communications to understand the real threat level.
Plus the whole issue of how accurate those visual counts really are, with detection rates potentially varying so much.
Exactly. Those variable correction factors add uncertainty to the overall numbers and make tracking trends precisely very difficult.
So beyond those immediate puzzles, what are the key things scientists still really need to figure out for the long term? What are the big knowledge gaps?
Several critical areas. First, understanding the sublethal effects of disease, especially in malaria. How does chronic infection affect their foraging, breeding, and resilience, particularly when combined with stress like food scarcity during El Niño? Second, we desperately need to quantify bycatch. We know penguins get caught in illegal nets, but we have no real idea how many. Is it a minor issue or a major hidden source of mortality holding back recovery? We need numbers. Third, the long-term effectiveness of those artificial nests. They work now, but how long will they last? How much maintenance do they need over decades through multiple El Niño cycles? Fourth, the impact of microplastics. What are the real physiological consequences of eating thousands of these particles every day? We need toxicology studies to understand the health risks. And finally, deep genetics. Are the small outer colonies self-sufficient, or do they depend on the main Western population? We need a full genomic picture to define proper management units and understand connectivity across their small range.
That's a hefty research agenda. What's the plan to tackle these gaps?
There's a clear path. Short term, the absolute priority is resolving the 2021 versus 2023 census issue with rigorous counting methods. Starting a bycatch monitoring program is also urgent, maybe working with local fishers, and controlled studies on disease and stress interactions. Midterm, we need that comprehensive genomic assessment. Long-term tracking studies using advanced tags to see how foraging changes with climate cycles. A detailed ecotoxicology work on the microplastic threat. It's a lot, but it's all crucial. The Galapagos penguin, living right on its ecological edge, is such a sensitive indicator for ocean health. What happens to them tells us so much about climate change and human impacts. Continued research and strong conservation aren't just about saving this one amazing bird. They're vital lessons for the whole planet.
What an absolutely incredible story we've explored today. The Galapagos penguin surviving against the odds on the equator, with its amazing cooling tricks, the dramatic population swings tied to ocean currents, and facing so many challenges from disease and us humans. But it's also hopeful to hear about the dedicated work being done, like building those penguin condos and tackling invasive species, trying to give them a fighting chance. As we finish up, here's something to think about. What does this penguin's journey marked by such unique adaptation but also extreme vulnerability teach us about life's resilience and fragility on our changing planet? How can we become better guardians for these kinds of unique, delicate ecosystems, recognizing that even the smallest creatures in the most remote places hold huge lessons about how connected everything really is? Thank you so much for joining us today for this exploration. We really hope you enjoyed learning about these extraordinary birds and the world they inhabit. See you next time on Saltwater Stories.